Hi guys, Bill again. This is a slightly longer vid than the usual ones I do, but bear with me. It's aimed more at our female subscribers. I think I'm going to need a little bit more time than usual to explain myself, but bear with me, you'll see what I mean in a couple of minutes. The first thing is, there's a couple of videos that I've linked down in the low bar. Now, if you're subscribed to Goodfella, you'll have seen the first one, and if you're not, how no? The vid's actually a reply to an experiment that was carried out by a couple of feminists. Now, I don't want you to get too excited by this, it's they came to a conclusion, then they conducted the experiment to verify it. Yeah, I know. That's so removed from science you can see creationists banging their head off the table at the idea. But, hey. The part I want to talk about is the bit in the video where they decide to do a bit of damselling. Our Penelope pit stop goes out and looks helpless by the side of the motorway, and single guys stop to help her out. Now, apparently, this is sexist and creepy. The part that intrigued me was the detail of it. See, they stopped at a busy freeway, which is stupid and bloody dangerous, to be perfectly honest. Here in Britain, it's illegal to park on the hard shoulder, that part of the tarmac next to the pavement. Now, I'd be interested to know if that's the same stateside. It blocks off emergency vehicle access to the motorway, and it raises the chances of a potentially serious accident, maybe even a fatal one, occurring. Anyway, our intrepid feminists broke their car. Now, this was no surprise to Ginge, because she knows how unreliable Ford batteries are. Hell, she even knows more about cars than Mike. Brilliant. Still, no worries there, because a wee bit more damselling managed to get another creepy guy to stop for them and fix the motor. And would you believe it, the misogynist bastard. He even suggested that Ginge go out and buy him a beer for his efforts. Shocking. I don't know where to start with this. First off, their experiment involved misleading, lying to and manipulating people of both genders. And the reason for any and all differences between reactions to our two, one male, one female feminist, was purely their sex. I mean, that's got to be it, hasn't it? The possibility that different people might have different negotiating skills, that wouldn't come into it, would it? Of course it wouldn't. The small detail that every single one of their experiments had a better or a more profitable outcome for the female didn't seem to register much with them either. But get back to that car. That was the most illuminating part of their entire experiment for me. It was a dangerous stunt, but it went awry when they flattened their own car's battery. I mean, that's something any child in the developed world could have predicted was going to happen. Now, Little Miss Passive Aggressive is much too knowledgeable about cars to take any kind of blame for that. So Henry Ford's got to carry the rap. Instead of spending hard cash on a recovery, or maybe calling some feminist friends to come and pick them up, they begged a passing stranger for help to rescue them. And then they had the barefaced audacity to slag off their Samaritan in the video that they were making. I mean, the bastard actually dared to speak to Ginge instead of just, doffing his cap and cracking on with the hard work like we're supposed to do. I mean, buy me a beer sometime. This is what he's supposed to have said. How about paying a fucking call-up truck for a charge? How about taking a traffic ticket? How about being smacked right up the ass with an 18-wheeler truck? Trucks that were just wheeling by, less than 8 inches away from the motor car. It's feminist thinking at its core. There's a point-blank refusal to accept any kind of responsibility for any of their actions. They're claiming, or at least she's claiming, unearned expertise by implying that she knows so much more about cars than Mike. It implies that she knows something about cars. They're manipulating somebody else into sorting out their problem, and then, after all of that, they've got the gumption to slander the very person who bailed them out of a difficult and even potentially dangerous situation. The egocentric, selfish, callous and ungrateful hubris of these people, it just beggars belief. Now just draw a deep breath. Not everyone is like that. Now watch the second vid. Now it's a show that we don't actually get here in the UK, so if you live in the States maybe you've seen it before. It's called What Would You Do, and it posts moral dilemmas and records people's reactions to them. Now this one is a guy that's apparently getting his drink spiked. Now it happens a lot in real life, people. In another life, I was in a job where I was subject to random drugs testing, and you wouldn't believe the number of young men who tested positive for a bewildering variety of prescribed substances, everything from Rohypnol to horse tranquilizers. All sorts of nasty stuff that these guys just had no idea was banged into their bloodstream the night before. Now, in the video, Joe Public's reaction is predictable. Fuck him. Be aware, fellas, you are on your own with your fellow man. But I think you probably knew that anyway. Thing is though, you might just be in luck. The heroine of this piece is a wonderful lady called Mabel Olmo. Now, no messing, the minute she saw some Jezebel spiking a guy's drink, trying to mug off her bowl, she was in like Flynn. She's a good girl. If it wasn't just actors, then she could have stopped a young man being raped or worse. Now, she might be unique, it's a possibility, but I don't think that's the case. Right here on YouTube, we've got a decent number of really good girls looking after us, proper guardian angels. And in your own personal life, if it's anything like mine, I'm sure you've met many women that are willing to look after the men around them. You might even be one of them. I don't think this is unusual. I don't think it's atypical, and I don't think it's unnatural behaviour. I think it's quite the reverse. We're communal animals, people. We live in societies, whether they're big or small. Our societies rely on looking out for one another. Now, men may not care very much for other men, but they'll risk a great deal for the sake of women and children. And women, while they might not be inclined to get into physical confrontations under normal circumstances, they won't. It's not unusual to hear of a woman risking her life to protect the children that she's been entrusted with. Now, I've read that at one point the human race went through a choke point. What that means is that at one point in our distant past there were less than 110,000 human beings on the entire planet. What that means is that we're descended from less than 55,000 individuals. Now, I'm not an expert by any kind of measure, but I'd say that going from near extinction, an extinction that 50-odd thousand of our ancestors didn't leave any offspring from, to go from that to becoming the dominant species on Earth, it must have taken a fair bit of cooperation. Now, feminists don't much care for the grand scheme of things. They don't much care for societies. They don't much care for the majority of humanity. They've got the priority list. There are persons who are special and privileged, and everyone needs to just step back and let the worthy people through. And with a truly Orwellian grasp of doublespeak, they justify this by accusations of privilege and imputations of malice on the part of any of their targeted victims. You see, what's important to feminists isn't the vanilla topics like human rights and equality, the stuff that they like to talk about. They're useful buzzwords, but their meaning isn't all that important to them. What they'd rather concentrate on is the esoteric stuff, respect, being taken seriously. The problem with that is that constantly abusing male nature, it erodes that respect, and it makes being taken seriously very unlikely. The assumptions that our society makes and the perceptions that we all share are based on the shared knowledge that males, by and large, get by on ability and merit. And all the talk of checking privilege, it doesn't change the white knighting and the pussy passes. See, we can use buzzwords too. It doesn't change the way we see society work on a daily basis. And the drawback with talking about stereotypes and throwing those buzzwords in there is that it draws attention to both sides of that coin. The natural consequence of prioritising female advancement and incentivising female participation in any given sphere is guaranteeing that any male that's in that environment who isn't prioritised, who isn't incentivised, is going to be perceived, rightly or wrongly, as having gotten there on his own merit. Now he's going to be afforded respect beyond his abilities. He's going to be assumed to have expertise that he might not even have earned. And he's going to be taken a lot more seriously as a result. This is a product of feminist activity. They're basically manufacturing the response that they say they oppose the most. Now, as time goes on, this is going to become even more pronounced unless or until females cease to be advantaged, assisted and incentivised in almost every sphere of middle class activity. Trying to eradicate feminism by applying huge doses of feminism, it's not going to give our little ginger princesses the kudos that they think they deserve. Now, relying heavily on males whenever it provides any kind of advantage to themselves, while demanding to get the same treatment and respect as demonstrably more self-reliant and capable individuals, is unrealistic at the best of times. Now, in case you're thinking that I'm talking about the ability and the talent of gendered individuals, I'd like to give you a little example of what I'm talking about. Feminists use doublespeak. They're immensely privileged, but they try to claim that those in opposition to them are actually doing so from a position of privilege. It's simply not the case. I'd like to take a recent example of a very privileged feminist launching a vicious attack on... well, actually, vicious attack is probably a bit strong. Karen Strawn, Girl Writes What, was absolutely savaged in the same way that you'd be savaged by a dead sheep, by Cases and Materials a wee while back. I'm not even going to link to the video. It's long and it's tedious and it's the intellectual equivalent of a lion barking at a mouse. He's not the most... Anyway, at one point in a very long and tedious ad hom, this numpty demanded to know what kind of degree Karen had that would justify her passing comment on some weighty legal issue. Now, her commentary was based on the social consequences of litigation and legislation. It wasn't about a point of law. It wouldn't make any difference whether she had spent years before the bench or whether she just read it in a book somewhere. That wasn't the point she was making. It did, though, serve to highlight the way our wee laddie tends to think. He's got some very flawed values and some amazingly unthinking prejudice going on in his head. Here in the United Kingdom, to attain a degree level education, it's so heavily incentivised, it's effectively cheaper than free to certain individuals. There's a raft of bursaries, there's tax and interest free long-term loans, there's heavily subsidised tuition fees, and the infrastructure is paid for and provided by general taxation. It makes a degree very affordable for anyone who's got enough time and financial support to survive the degree period. Now, that's the crux of it. You need the time, you need the financial support while you're a student. Guess who's got that? For middle class children, it's just a no-brainer. You live off mum and dad for a few more years, you gain access to a fantastic education and the lucrative managerial employment market after you've done your degree. A degree in the UK doesn't actually show you to be anything other than from a decent family background. It shows that you're willing to work consistently and hard for an extended period of time. It shows that you're perceptive enough to plan for the medium to long term. But it doesn't have a great deal to do with your ability. It doesn't have anything to say about your ambition. And although it is hard work, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're any harder working than someone who didn't take that university degree education. And it certainly doesn't mark you as more intelligent than the average. What it is, to use the feminist's own word, it's an indicator of privilege. Now, numpty nuts completely missed the fact that Karen's work is used in a far more demanding education system in North America to teach university students. If you want to talk about university, her university credentials are earned by virtue of her intelligence, her perception, her hard work, and her carefully targeted effort. Now, he failed to appreciate that him being the recipient of a heavily subsidised education has given him a massive societal advantage. It actually makes his position and his judgment less valued in this instance than an individual, in this instance Karen, who's earned the expertise that they're claiming. So he gave himself a bit of showing up, basically. It's the attitude that pervades feminist thinking. They've had every societal and cultural advantage possible plied on them from a very early age, and it just seems to make them think that they should have additional unearned privileges. It's an absolute outrage to them that they aren't afforded by right the same preconceived perceptions of ability and competence that are granted to less privileged individuals that they want to look down on. And there's a real cognitive dissonance here. They don't have the ability to reconcile their childish greed to have every desirable quality of human interaction afforded to them, with no attempt at understanding why certain individuals are met with certain reactions that they would like to be met with. This lack of understanding on their part, it makes any attempt at changing the situation utterly pointless for them. Their usual petulant demand is for the rest of society to alter its behaviour to meet their feminist expectations, but it's not only completely unreasonable and totally unjustifiable, it's also unattainable. Now, this can't be news to mainstream feminists. They're onto the third wave now. They'd have to be incredibly naive or just plain stupid to imagine otherwise, and I don't believe that they're either. Which leaves another possibility. It's like doping somebody's drink. They're trying to remove our cultural ability to think clearly and make reasoned judgments. Now, we've been poisoned by bewildering and contradictory demands from a vast choir of feminists for years now. Our society is now open to manipulation by these people. And their true purpose is a very simple one. They're looking after the interests of a small, privileged elite. They're attaining it by carrying out large-scale social engineering, and that engineering is as damaging to our culture as a dose of Rohypnol in your Jack Daniels. It's pretty clear to me that the feminists are taking advantage of the Western cultural war of looking after women and children before adult males to further their aims. But feminism doesn't equal female or feminine. It's a word they've latched onto. It certainly doesn't attempt to attain any kind of equality either between the genders or, more importantly, between the many different layers of our society that they're constantly trying to bring into their conversations. Now, it's also pretty clear to me that adult males are unlikely to take much action on their own to protect themselves on what they perceive to be their own account. Men don't look after their own interests. It's not really the male position in society. But ladies, you're not blinded by the same cultural expectations. Now, just like Mabel Olmo, you can point out that Jezebel pouring drugs into a man's drink. You can have a much greater impact than any man can just by following your conscience, just by doing the right thing. Big question you've got to ask yourself is, why would you want to do that? What do you stand to gain? Now, my MGTOW friends are fond of the notion that women need to profit from a transaction to actually invest in it. I'm not so sure. I mean, it's possible that morality is enough. It's possible that natural justice is what motivates you. And if you're seeking true equality, the opportunity to earn your place, to justify your worth, I'm going to doff my hat to you. You're a better person than most of us. But I don't think that's realistic. And I can offer you a lot more than that. Mabel Olmo said that we look after our own. That was what was at the forefront of her mind when she was protecting what she thought was some poor guy in a bar just about to be worked over by some Jezebel. It's deep rooted in us, right down inside of us. The thing that drives all of us is that desire for fair treatment and equality, but it's there for a reason. We're a community. Everything that we do together. Now, if you look after that community and you look after its strength, it will be strong enough to support you, and there will be somebody there for you, generally right about when you need them most. And that goes for everybody. Even some thoughtless, selfish, stuck-up ginger cow daft enough to break her car down on the side of the freeway. Anyway, thanks for listening this far, girls and boys. Laters.